Tonight, as Russian forces appears to be stepping up attack, Russian soldiers move towards the middle of Ukraine's Severodonetsk. China sent 30 planes into Taiwan air defense zone. Aspiring actor tourist among 22 killed in Nepal plane crash. Shanghai begins demolition fences ahead of COVID lockdown end. And as certain uncertainties over IMF bailout emerge, Pakistan's rupee sings. Good evening and welcome to International News Desk Live. I am Lois Duraki. According to a Moscow-backed separatist leader, Russian forces have taken control of about a third of the major eastern Ukrainian city of Severodonetsk, but their attack was taking elongated than they had hoped. The street battles with Ukrainian forces as well as Russian shooting have left Severodonetsk, the last city still held by Kyiv in Ukraine's strategic Luhansk province, in shells. Russian troops have gone into the city's southeastern and northeastern borders, but the Ukrainian defense has reduced the wider Russian campaign across the Donbas region. Report says fighting was raging in the city, but Russian forces were not advancing as speedily as might have been hoped. Regional Governor Serhiy Haidar said, according to reports on Tuesday, that Russian soldiers are gradually advancing towards the middle of the city, but said Ukrainian troops defending Severodonetsk were not at risk of being encircled as they could retreat to Lysychansk across the Neva. Military analysts describe the fight for Severodonetsk as part of a race against time for the Kremlin. The city is significant to Russians' efforts to hurriedly complete the seizure of the eastern industrial region of the Donbas before more Western arms arrive to bolster Ukraine's defense. Luhansk was recognized as independent by Russia when Moscow launched its attack of Ukraine on February 24th. Although Kyiv and its Western allies consider it part of Ukraine, Russia has been pressing to capture the whole Donbas region, consisting of the Luhansk and the Donetsk regions, with Moscow claims on behalf of separatist proxies. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Lukreg Imahov was the 32nd media worker to die in Ukraine since Russia invaded it. China has made its second largest invasion into Taiwan's air defense zone this year as Taipei signaled it's set to extend security ties with the United States. Taiwan's defense ministry said that 30 Chinese military aircraft, two-thirds of them fighter jets, entered the southwestern part of its air defense identification zone ADIS on Monday, and that it had jumbled its own air force and positioned air defense missile systems in response. The intrusion was the largest since January, when Beijing sent 39 aircraft into the ADIS. Earlier this month, it sent 18 warplanes into the area. Beijing claims self-ruled Taiwan as its own and has not ruled out the use of force to take control of the island. In recent months, the United States has accused China of intensifying up tensions across the Taiwan Strait, with Secretary of State Antony Blinken singling out aircraft incursions as an example of increasingly provocative rhetoric and activity. Although the United States has no official diplomatic ties with Taiwan, it is the island's most important international supporter and supplier of weapons and follows what it calls a policy of strategic ambiguity. On Tuesday, Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen said following the latest intrusion, there were plans for cooperation between the Taiwan military and the U.S. National Guard. Visiting U.S. Senator Domi Duckworth at her office in Taipei, Tsai noted that Duckworth was one of the major backers of the Taiwan Partnership Act. The legislation has acknowledged bipartisan support in the United States Congress, although it has yet to become law. Last year, Taiwan recorded 969 attacks by Chinese warplanes into its ADIS, according to reports more than double the roughly 380 carried out in 2020. Taiwan has reported 465 incursions so far in 2022, a nearly 50% addition from the same period last year. The rise in activity is adding to pressure on Taiwan's Air Force, which on Tuesday suspended flight training for new pilots after reporting a second fatal accident this year. The AT-3 jet crashed during a training mission from the southern Gangshan Air Base, and the body of the 23-year-old pilot had already been found, the Defense Ministry said. Now, the 37-year-old Prakash Sunwar was an ambitious actor based in the capital, Kathmandu, working as a trekking guide to help achieve his dream, often used to get foreign clients, taking them to exotic Himalayan landscapes. He was accompanied by 2 German tourists on Sunday, Mick Graf Grit and Uwe Wilner, on a flight to Jomsung, a popular trekking and pilgrimage destination in Multan district bordering Tibet. But the Tara Air 9AEC flight crashed less than 20 minutes after taking off from Pokhara, a bustling tourist town about 200 kilometers, 124 miles west of capital Kathmandu. On Monday, authorities in Nepal were able to recover 21 bodies from the wreckage site in Sansowar Cliff at an altitude of 14,500 feet in Tasangtu, a village in Mostang district. On Tuesday morning, the last body was recovered. Last Wednesday, Sunwar told Roshan Batwan, his best friend and his dance buddy, that he will be away for a month, taking some travelers to Pokhara and then Mustang. But Bantawa has fond memories of his friend whose life was cut short by the Tara airplane crash on Sunday. He was very active, liked to sing, dance, perform, and also a good writer, he said. On the same flight were 7 members of Rajan Kumar Golaya's family. Golay, accompanied by his family members, including his elderly parents, was on a pilgrimage to Mukitnath, a sacred temple for both Hindus and Buddhists. Shanghai government have started demolition fences around housing compounds and tearing down police tape off public squares and buildings as the city prepares to lift a 2-month-long lockdown at midnight. The ruthlessly enforced restrictions have caused gloom among the city's 25 million people and left many struggling to get food or find emergency health care. They have also triggered public anger and sporadic protests inside Shanghai and assaulted the city's manufacturing and export-heavy economy, affecting supply chains in China and around the world. Starting Wednesday, life is set to return to something more like normal when the passes required for people to go out for a few hours will be removed, public transport will recommence, and residents will be encouraged to go back to work. The relaxing of curbs applies only to those in low-risk areas, or about 22.5 million people. Residents will still have to wear masks and are discouraged from meeting in groups. Dining inside restaurants will also remain barred, while shops will be allowed to operate at 75% capacity. Residents will have to get tests for COVID-19 every 72 hours to take public transport and enter public venues, and those who test positive, as well as their close contacts, will still have to endure a strict quarantine. China is alone among other major countries enforcing an uncompromising zero-COVID policy that aims to stamp out all outbreaks as soon as they occur, no matter the cost. The highly transmissible Omicron variant is likely to make comebacks as it remains to be seen if frequent testing can keep it on the check. On business and economy, Pakistan's rupee is poised for its biggest monthly fall in more than 2 years as worsening finances and uncertainty over the International Monetary Fund's IMF bailout plan weigh on the currency. In many, the rupee has declined about 7%. The updraft dropped since March 2020 as the country negotiates a bailout package with the MIF and other nations to keep its economy from sinking and prevent a default. Analysts expect the currency to remain under pressure even as the government took steps to meet the MIF's demands. Finance Minister Miftah Ismail said last week Pakistan requires about $36 billion to $37 billion in financing for the fiscal year starting June. Morgan Stanley estimates the funding gap to be as high as $8 billion this calendar year. A bailout by the MIF has become critical as countries that have typically been generous lenders are proceeding more cautiously now. IGI and Ismail Iqbal Securities predicts that rupee will fall to 20% per dollar by the end of the year. It closed at 199.0 per dollar on Monday. Pakistan is looking to secure a staff-level agreement with the fund in June to unlock the remaining $3 billion from its loan program. It has also requested to add the loan size to $2 billion. It faces $3.2 billion in dollar debts due this year, the highest amount in the next decade, data compiled. Still on the news, Taiwan might get economic deal with the United States after exemption from IPEF. The United States and Taiwan are reportedly working on a deal to improve economic cooperation in areas like trade, agriculture, and supply chains after the self-ruled island was exempted for United States President Joe Biden's economic framework targeted at opposing Chinese influence. The proposed agreement will be similar to the U.S.-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework (IPEF), which U.S. President launched last week in Japan, according to research which first reported the deal, citing unnamed sources. The IPEF is seen as an auxiliary for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which former U.S. President Donald Trump abandoned in 2017, and a major plank of the Biden administration's plan to augment U.S. engagement in the Asia-Pacific. The framework intends to foster mutual standards in 4 broad areas: supply chain resilience, clean energy and infrastructure, taxation and anti-corruption, and fair trade, but does not expand market access like a traditional free trade agreement. The framework's lack of tariff reductions has been met with disappointment in the region, where many export-reliant countries are seeking greater access to the U.S. market. Taiwan has yet to commit to any deal with the United States, but economic and trade relations between Taiwan and the United States have developed more closely since Biden took office, Joanne Wu, spokesperson for Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said. The minister said the two sides are set to meet again in the coming weeks following new talks between U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai and Taiwan's Minister without Portfolio John Deng, during which they agreed to extend trade and investment. In the lead-up to Biden's trip to Asia, there were rumors that Taiwan could be added in its itinerary due to its globally significant role in fields such as semiconductors and high-end manufacturing. While the IPEF is planning to counterbalance China's growing clouds in the Asia-Pacific, it is likely that some members are unwilling to include Taiwan for fear of upsetting China. Beijing claims the self-ruling democracy as a province that should be reunified with the mainland by force if essential, and has blocked its participation in most international organizations. However, a less formal bilateral deal could still bring numerous of the benefits of the IPEF without the political headaches, said Wentin Song, a political scientist who teaches at Australian National University's Taiwan Studies program. The IPEF presently has 13 members, apart from the United States, Australia, Brunei, India, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and Fiji. While Taiwan has been left out of the IPEF for now, U.S. officials have publicly showed their desire for extending economic ties. Jake Sullivan, White House National Security Advisor, said last week the U.S. wants to collaborate on high technology issues, including on semiconductors and supply chains, although only on a bilateral basis for now. The European Union leaders agreed to Russian ban after a compromise with Hungary. European Union leaders have decided in principle to cut 90% of oil imports from Russia by the end of this year, cutting off a vital source of funding for Moscow's incursion of Ukraine after reaching a compromise deal with Hungary. The 27-nation organization has spent weeks battering over a total ban on Russian oil, but met stubborn resistance from Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who said an embargo will destroy his country's economy. Leaders hatched a compromise deal to exempt deliveries arriving in Europe by the Druzhba pipeline at a meeting in Brussels on Monday. Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU's executive, said the move will effectively cut around 90% of oil imports from Russia to the EU by the end of the year, when Germany and Poland have promised to end deliveries via pipeline. 2/3 of the Russian oil imported into the European Union is delivered by tanker and 1/3 by the Druzhba pipeline. The ban will reach 90% after Poland and Germany, which are also linked to the pipeline, stop taking delivery of Russian oil by the end of 2022. A wide view of the meeting hall and delegates sitting around the oval-shaped table as Volodymyr Zelensky speaks via video link and is seen on a large screen to one side of the hall. Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukrainian president, said, according to reports, leaders, they were being too soft on Russia and should take harsher action. The remaining 10% will be for the moment excluded from sanctions so that Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic, which are all linked to the southern leg of the pipeline, continue to have entry to fuel they cannot easily replace. The compromise means other actions can also take effect, including disconnecting Russia's biggest bank, Sberbank, from the global SWIFT system, banning 3 state broadcasters and blacklisting individuals blamed for war crimes. Coming down to Africa, Polish and Egyptian president deliberate liquefied gas supply and cooperation in Cairo. On Monday, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Egyptian president, met with Polish President Andrzej Duda in Cairo. The North African leader is hosting his counterpart for a 3-day state visit. Issues on the agenda included strengthening economic and scientific cooperation, as well as the next United Nations Summit on Climate scheduled in November in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh. We welcome Poland's offering their experience during the International Climate Change Conference, COP27, considering that Poland had hosted the summit 3 previous times, el-Sisi said. The talks saw an agreement on how to support the social development and economy during the mitigating and adaptation measures amid the climate change effects. An invitation was sent to the Polish side to participate on a high level at the COP27 Climate Change Summit. The Polish head of state also promoted Poland's potential to export crops during the joint press conference. Egypt buys around 60% of its wheat from Ukraine, and Russia and now wishes to diversify its sources of supply. Duda backed EU negotiations with Egypt to fill the gap in gas supply. African energy producers have received much attention from the European Union since the war in Ukraine started. Countries like Nigeria and Algeria are courting and signing deals. To mark the launching of what both leaders wish to be a fresh era of bilateral relations, Poland is to recommence direct flights of the national airline between Cairo and Warsaw on 31st May. Finally, some political prisoners freed after lifting of state of emergency in Sudan. On Monday, the Sudanese military authority headed by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan released political prisoners. 125 activists were able to leave their cells, according to reports. They were supposedly leaders of the resistance committees, a group opposing the military coup. The prisoners were set free from facilities in the capital, Khartoum, Port Sudan and Rabat in the southeast. The news came after lifting of the state of emergency. On Sunday, Sudan's ruling Sovereign Council suggested that people imprisoned under the emergency law should be freed. The defense minister insisted these recommendations were meant to facilitate negotiations between the military and the pro-democracy movement. United Nations mediated talks to solve the country's political crisis were rejected by the Sudanese Professionals Association, SOFA, an activist coalition that played an essential role in the ouster of leader al-Bashir in 2019. Relentless protests assembling thousands have taken place across the country. The October 2021 military takeover ended a military-civilian power-sharing arrangement. Earlier, I said Russian soldiers moved towards the middle of Ukraine's southern Donetsk. China sends 30 planes into Taiwan air defense zone. Aspiring actor, tourist among 22 killed in Nepal plane crash. Shanghai begins demolition fences ahead of COVID lockdown end. And as uncertainties over IMF bailout emerge, Pakistan's rupee sinks. That's you up to date with international news. Always remember, there is nothing impossible to they who will try. Thanks for the privilege of your time.